This is just the beginning.
Welcome to an Axios virtual event. I'm Mike Allen, a co-founder of Axios, coming from my home in Arlington, Virginia, probably to yours. So thank you for joining us. We're going to be talking today about the pandemic pivot, how small businesses are surviving, thriving, and what they still need in these very difficult times, the hardest times in our lifetime for a small business. We appreciate Facebook for making these conversations available. And thank all of you for joining us on YouTube, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and on Axios.com. We'd love for you to follow along on Twitter at Axios or hashtag Axios events. And with that, we'll plunge in to the pandemic pivot. Our first guest is Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma. He's someone who spent years in the ministry working with young people and with families. And now he has gone from Oklahoma City to Capitol Hill, where he joins us now. Senator Lankford, thank you for joining Axios.
Glad to be able to be with you.
So, Senator, in your previous life, you ran the largest youth camp in America. I bet you're glad that's not your job this summer.
Yeah, this summer it's tough to be able to be a camp director. Not many camps are still operating this summer. Most everyone, including the one that I used to direct, are having to take the summer off. It's the first time since World War II, actually, that the camp has not met for camp. And that's true of a lot of camps across America, which is such a rite of passage for so many kids, elementary, middle school, high school, and college age. So it's tough for those families and for those locations, and quite frankly, for them as employers as well.
Senator, we're social distancing. You're on the Hill. I'm across the Potomac River in Arlington. Axios always starts with the news and the Senate, the White House, the House, all trying to negotiate the next coronavirus rescue package, which has a lot that really is going to make a difference to small business and their workers. At the moment, it seems like a lot of daylight. How optimistic are you about this being resolved? And what's going to be the key to resolving it, whenever that is?
Yeah, the key to resolving it's not hard. It's keeping it focused on the actual areas of coronavirus need of COVID-19 and keeping it focused on that. The House proposal that they put out a couple of months ago now, what they call the HEROES Act, it's $3 trillion. Fully a third of the spending is on items that are not related at all to COVID-19. They're just a wish list. New York Times even came out when it was released and said this was a big liberal wish list of a lot of things that they want to be able to do someday.
Yeah. So, Senator, are we talking days, weeks, months? What?
Yeah, the hope is days at this point. We've got to be able to get everyone to actually move on this. So far, my Democratic colleagues have said, no, it's the HEROES Act or it's nothing. We tried to actually do last week to do just extend the unemployment assistance for another week while we get through it. And they responded with, it's HEROES Act or it's nothing. Well, that's really not helpful. So key things that have got to be there. We've got to deal with vaccines. We've got to deal with treatments. We should do something for schools. We need to deal with liability issues. Quite frankly, our colleges and universities and businesses across the country are saying we really need liability protections right now to be able to reopen. We need to deal with small business issues. It's an extension of the Paycheck Protection Program, possibly a re-up for a second round for some businesses that are very, very hard hit. But we need to keep it as narrowly focused as we can, focused on vaccines and treatments and testing, and then focused on what do we need to do to be able to continue to function. There shouldn't be a focus on getting everyone 100% and staying fully whole. We can't do that. But how do we get through this together to get on the other side?
Senator, a lot of the entrepreneurs, small businesses that I talk to have been very skeptical about the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP. You view it as like anything in government, that it has flaws, but you believe that it net has helped people back home.
Yeah, by far, it's had more success than failures. Every federal program will have some fraud and will have some problems. Unemployment insurance that everyone talks about, we desperately need to extend, has had just billions of dollars of fraud in it this time, with people from international entities even coming in and getting unemployment assistance. So that's had problems. Paycheck Protection Program has had some problems as well, but overwhelmingly, it's been very, very successful. The Paycheck Protection Program was designed to keep small businesses and not-for-profits running so their people didn't have to end up on unemployment assistance. And when we go on the other side of this, they're still operating, and it has done that.
Now, Senator, you and I did a little pregame chat before this event, and you told me something interesting. You said that in a way, the economy is like the virus. Tell me what you mean by that.
So the virus, as we know full well now, that some people are not affected by it at all. They get it and have no symptoms. Other people get it and they end up in the hospital on a ventilator or have fatalities with it. It's pretty dramatic for those individuals that get it and are really affected. The economy is the same way. We've got some businesses that have had no problem working through COVID-19. They're functioning. Some are actually doing better. If you're selling lumber or windows or building supplies or craft supplies, or you're a grocery store or retailer, you're doing great. In fact, this has been your best year ever. For other businesses, they've been really, really hard hit. Restaurants, hotels, anything convention related, travel, all vacation related, all those things have been horrifically hard hit. So whatever package we put out next, we should treat it like we're treating the virus. Some people not affected, they're not going to need additional federal money and assistance. Other people are dramatically hard hit. We should target those specific entities. And a lot of the conversation has just been blanket, send out money to everybody. We've got to remember this is other people's money we're dealing with. This is not just invented money that's out there. It's borrowed from the future or it's taken from your next door neighbor in tax dollars. So let's target it to what we need in the areas that it's needed and not just do a blanket amount to everybody.
Senator, back home, you had a very interesting and illuminating conversation with an entrepreneur who has a craft store. Tell us about that conversation.
Yeah, one of the craft stores that's out there, and obviously there's a lot of them that are out there, but one of the craft stores that I talked to, they were closed down for almost 10 weeks. You go from the end of March all the way for the next 10 weeks after that when they started reopening and the state reopened. They've now had such a boom in business after that. They're actually 40% year over year up this year than last year, even being closed 10 weeks. That's because so many people are working from home, doing different crafts and projects at home, that once they reopened, it's just been a boom in business. So while we have to really look at the reality on the ground, the same thing's happening with a lot of my small towns. A lot of small towns in Oklahoma have had their highest tax revenue they've ever had in the history of the town this year. And you would think that's not true, but it is true because they're used to those folks in small towns driving to big cities to shop, but they're not. They're staying at home. They're shopping online. So the tax revenue is coming back in, but they're shopping at those little shops in town. And so they're getting more revenue. And so it's an interesting balance here. Not everyone's affected the same way. And a lot of the talk about blanket, everybody's hurt on this. It's not true, but there are some people that have been dramatically hurt during this time period.
Now, Senator, something you've pushed for many years is a universal charitable giving act. And in this COVID moment, you've re-upped that. What would the Charitable Giving Act do, and what is the outlook for it at this moment?
So let me give you a quick context on it. I think there are three safety nets in America. The family is the first safety net. The second safety net are not-for-profits and faith-based entities, churches and such. The third one is government. A lot of times we run immediately to government and say the government's the real safety net for welfare benefits, for SNAP assistance, for all those things. It's not true. The families, the local nonprofits, and then it goes to government. During this time period, nonprofits around the country have really had a tough time trying to be able to survive during this time period where they don't know what giving is going to be like. That is what our front line to actually helping people. So what we did in the CARES Act that already passed in March was give $300 above the line for anyone who donates to a not-for-profit. They will immediately get $300 deduction on their taxes, even if they don't itemize this year. That was an incentive to say, donate to a local rural nonprofit, to an urban nonprofit, whatever it may be, faith-based or non-faith-based, doesn't matter, donate to that. I'm trying to push that in the next piece as well to expand that because we really need our not-for-profits to be strong because they are the safety net before people ever get to government. They help with homelessness, with feeding, with clothing, with job training. All of those things are essential in our communities and we need them to be strong.
Senator, a point that you're big on is that nonprofits are small businesses. They're employers.
Yeah, it's interesting. Historically, we treat nonprofits different than we do other employers, which makes me laugh. The people that work for nonprofits know that is their job. So we as a government should be neutral, whether you're a not-for-profit or for-profit business. In this situation, treat everyone exactly the same. Faith-based, non-faith-based, doesn't matter. That's an employer. And what we're trying to do is keep the economy working and keep the engagement of people. So the CARES Act did that. It treated every employer just as an employer. The government staying neutral. I said to somebody, whether you're a Baptist or a bar, it just doesn't matter. You're an employer in this situation, and we should treat everyone the same and neutral in that situation. And I think that's a good place for government to be, not try to pick winners and losers based on what they talk about and what they do. They're an employer.
Now, Senator, that there is a tweet for those tweeting along at hashtag Axios events, whether you're a Baptist or a bar. Now, Senator, I know that you've had a lot of conversations back home about digital tools and some of the e-commerce pivots that we've seen among small businesses. And you told me one very inspiring story about someone who shared their digital tools.
Yeah, there's been several that I've seen like this that are smaller businesses and not-for-profits. One of them was a church that's in Oklahoma that they had done online streaming for a long time with their services. And as people know, starting in March, churches were shut down across the country. And a lot of small rural churches had never done online streaming of their services. And now they're suddenly telling their people, go home and watch it online when they don't have anything on their website to do it. So one of the churches that had done it for a long time just changed up their software and released it out and said, anyone who wants to use it can use it. And the next week, thousands of churches across the country were using that same software. And everyone watching it thought it was their church had come up with it, when it was actually one church just donated the software and said, anyone who wants to use it can use it. That's the kind of thing that we've seen across the country during this time period. Small businesses saying, hey, I figured out how to be able to do the online retailer. Here's how I'm doing it, and sharing that idea with others. Seeing not-for-profits sharing their ways of doing work. And for churches, we've seen that a lot as well. Churches are getting back to the basics, taking care of widows and orphans in their distress and trying to be able to help out. That's a basic thing that they should have been doing all along. And if they weren't doing it, they're sharing ideas of how they can do it now because the need is great.
So a little digital lifeline out in the real America.
Yeah. Yep, we've seen that all over the place, and certainly we've seen that all across Oklahoma.
Senator, penultimate question. You worked for a long time in ministry. You and I talked about living life with no regrets. And you have one piece of advice that you give to young people about their own families that I think will really serve people in our audience.
Yeah, if I get time with young people at any moment, I'll push them on a couple of key things. One is make sure you redeem their relationship with your families, especially folks that are juniors and seniors. They're looking towards graduation and leaving and getting out of the house, and they've got broken relationships with their families. And they just think, I'm going to get a job and get a life and get out of here, and I won't have to worry about it. But that never really works out. You spend the rest of your life in regret, wishing you had a better relationship with your brothers and your sisters and your mom and dad. And it gets harder and harder as you get older and older. So every birthday, every holiday, every time that you would typically get together as a family, or other people are getting together with their family, the birth of your children, all those things, that broken relationship is still sitting there, and you wish it was different. So if there's anything I can pass on to those young people growing up, it's, if you have a faith, live your faith, actually live the principles of your faith, and take care of your own family. Do whatever it takes to be able to redeem that relationship before you move off.
And senators, we say goodbye. We're all shut in, locked down. This is my home. While we were doing the mic check, you were making fun of my art. And Senator, when you're back in Oklahoma, your two daughters are back under your roof. How has that changed life?
Yeah, they're out now, but my daughters are 23 and 20. And when they were back in the house again for the several months there when we were all locked down on it, it was really nice to be able to have everybody in the kitchen making dinner. It was almost like we were doing that before, but they weren't near as messy as they were when they were 13 and 10. But it was just really nice to all be together and to be able to gather and play card games after dinner, and just to be able to visit and make dinner together. Was a really nice, refreshing time. Though we were working like crazy, all in different parts of the house, doing our work and doing our stuff, getting together for those times was pretty special. I'm glad to be able to have it.
A new old tradition.
Yeah. Gathering around the dinner table shouldn't be a tradition that we've lost. It should be one that we regain.
Amen. Senator Lankford, thank you so much for joining this Axios virtual event. Really appreciate it, and look forward to social distancing on the Hill.
Look forward to it as well. Keep a good, safe 6-foot distance.
That's right. Thank you, Senator. Really appreciate it. We'd like to thank our partner, Facebook, for making these pandemic pivot conversations about small business in America possible. And now I'm going to kick it across town to Jim Vandehei, Axios CEO.
Thank you very much, Mikey. It's now my pleasure to have a conversation with Karen Kerrigan, who is the chair of the Small Business Roundtable. Karen, you have been working with Facebook, surveying small businesses, something like 85,000 of them. What is the most interesting thing that you've found about what small businesses are worried about and also how they're adapting to this extraordinary moment?
Well, they're massively moving to technology and technology platforms. 51% said that they've upped their use of social media in order to engage with customers, find new customers. So they really embraced technology at this very critical time, which is helping them, to survive the COVID-19 economy. They are having a lot of challenges, access to capital, as well as demand for their products and services are two big challenges they currently have. But despite all the challenges, 59% say they're optimistic about the future. And I think this is really terrific given the state that we're in right now and sort of the uncertain times that they find themselves operating in.
And thinking about the data and the fact that there's few people in the country who know more about small businesses and the trends than you do, what worries you most? You read these stories that some people say a third of small businesses that have had trouble during the coronavirus could go out of business. Is it real? Like, how worried are you about the long-term implications for these small businesses that can't adapt quick enough?
I am I'm very concerned about that. And I live and breathe small business, and what concerns them concerns me. So obviously, the uncertainty of the virus and then the government actions in response to that, whether there'll have to be additional shutdowns and other measures taken that would restrict economic activity and mobility. So that's a real concern. I think the other big thing, Jim, we saw these numbers last week, is the plummeting of GDP. Just was shocking. 32.9%. We lost $2 trillion in wealth over the last 2 quarters. So, where small businesses, they're operating on tight margins. They don't have a lot of cash, and if money if revenues are not coming in, and they still have expenses, I mean, that's what concerns me a lot, and particularly. Again, if they cannot drive revenues into their businesses, this is the big concern, and it is real in terms of the number of businesses that can go over, given, again, the tight margins that they're operating in, the very competitive environment, and the lack of demand.
What do they need most in this next stimulus package from Congress? Many of the small businesses did get money from the PPP program. Many did not. Like, what would help most small businesses the quickest and sort of in the most?
Jim, we're getting there in terms of these packages. So they've been, perfective, and they've progressed, as Congress has sort of massaged them and changed them a little bit here and there. I think the most important thing they need right now is access to capital. And what we're seeing now come out of in this next phase 4 package, I do believe there's consensus in terms of there's got to be flexibility around the PPP program. There's got to be another loan program put into place that has very favorable demands, a long-term recovery loan. I mean, I think this could be the plan that the Fed has not gotten right with the Main Street funding program. So they need capital, and there needs to be favorable terms in terms of low interest rates and paying them over a long period of time. So these programs can't be restrictive. They got to allow businesses to be able to access this money and use it the way that they need it in order to survive and hopefully get beyond this pandemic.
And for those that do survive, there's no doubt many of them will be leaner. But it's also what you were saying at the top, this idea that they have adapted to technology. A lot of these technologies can be relatively low cost, in some case free to use. I was having a conversation with the CEO of Qualcomm, who was explaining that because of the virus, because of the needs for internet capacity for these small businesses and individuals, that we're seeing the implementation of 5G in some areas speed up. Talk about the implications of 5G at scale for small businesses?
Well, first of all, small businesses have adopted to technology, and many of them now are using cloud-based services in order to collaborate, to operate in a virtual environment, embedding e-commerce, making payroll, doing the range of things that they need to do where they cannot be on site, and gives them a lot of flexibility working in this economy. So a technology survey that we released last month found that 76% of small businesses said they wouldn't have been able to survive the pandemic if it wasn't for cloud services. So what comes next is 5G. You do have more small businesses that are adopting technology, embedding it across their operations, and using cloud-based services. And this is going to make the transition to 5G much easier for them, using the tools to make them much more competitive with the big guys, right? In terms of the customer experience, meeting customers where they are. So that is sort of the silver lining, Jim, of this crisis, is the embrace and the use of technology that's going to allow small businesses to compete with the big guys once 5G goes national or is available everywhere.
And Karen, as we wrap up, if I'm a small business owner and I'm struggling and I'm trying to survive, you know the landscape. What are some resources? What can I do? Who can I call? Where can I get some additional information on how to adapt quick enough to survive during the virus?
Well, one great resource is the organization that I happen to head, the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council, SBEcouncil.org. We link to all of the best resources out there. We don't try to recreate the wheel. Really helping businesses adopt to the tools, letting them know where the market is headed, free or low-cost services that they can use to help them get through this period of time. So SBEcouncil.org. And again, we link to government, private sector partners, and great content that's going to help you through this very difficult period.
Thank you, Karen, for a fascinating conversation. Thank you to Facebook for making this broader discussion about small business in America possible. Now over to Naila Budhu, who is the anchor of our new podcast, Axios Today, for 2 more illuminating conversations about small business in America.
Thanks, Jim. Hi, I'm Naila Budhu, and I host the Axios Today morning podcast. Thanks again for joining us. And I'm so pleased to welcome our next guest, the owner of the Curvy Bride, Michelle Files, joining us from Manalapan, New Jersey. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, how are you, Naila? Thank you so much for having me on today.
Oh, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with us. I know when you're a small business owner, your time is very precious. So I appreciate it. I wonder if you could start by telling us, I know you've run the Curvy Bride since 2012, right? And you were in finance before. I wonder if you could tell us how much of your finance background was an important part of starting this business.
Sure, definitely. Well, I have an MBA from Monmouth University, and I worked, as you mentioned, in finance. I used to work in Manhattan for some Fortune 500 companies, and it really wasn't my life's passion to do finance. I didn't really want to be at a desk all day, but I think it really was important to have that background as a small business owner because I was able to understand my finances as a business owner, which is so important, especially when acquiring financing or just your day-to-day operations. So it really helped in writing my business plan and in just applying for different loans or things along the way. So it's really important to have a finance background for me, especially with the timing of the things in my business. It's very different when the customer pays versus when the dresses actually come in and you have to pay for them. So it's definitely important, just especially for checks and balances and cash flow, et cetera.
Michelle, can you give us a sense of your dresses, like what the price point is of your dresses? And I wonder if that's changed during the pandemic.
Yeah, I would say most people come in with about a $1,500 to $2,000 budget. We're still seeing that, but I would definitely say people are more around that $1,000 price range. And also, a lot of people have unfortunately had to move their receptions to next year, but they still want to get married this year. So they're having micro or backyard weddings. So a lot of times they don't want to wear the same dress that they're going to wear next year at their reception. They would like to shop for a less expensive dress to wear now. So that's why we actually started offering all of our dresses off the rack. So you can either order a new one at retail price, or you can actually purchase the sample and take it with you that day at a discount. So it works out for everybody. There's something still for everybody.
So small businesses are always iterating, and you just talked about one of the changes that you made because of the pandemic. Another thing that you started doing were virtual and mobile visits. Can you tell us about how the bridal dress shopping experience is a very hands-on, personal one. How did you translate that into a virtual world?
Well, it was tough. All of us bridal shops really had to figure out something because we didn't realize that we were going to be closed for 3 months. So as we started to get into this closure, we realized we still need to bring in money. And we really all had to adapt in different ways. So one thing that I did, because people really still wanted to shop, and dresses do take around 6 to 8 months to come in if you're ordering a brand new dress. So a lot of people still wanted to shop, and Zoom was really taking flight during the pandemic, obviously. So a lot of people would get their whole bridal party together on Zoom, and I would do a virtual appointment for them at the shop. And beforehand, I would ask them, what is your measurements? What are you looking for? What's your venue like? And I would put various dresses on the mannequins for them. And if they wanted a step further, we would actually charge a small fee to come out to their house with 5 dresses that they liked. And that fee would actually be applied to their dress if they decided to purchase it. So that's where the mobile appointments were born. And we were actually the first and I think only ones in the area to offer something like that. And it really took off. People loved it, and they were still able to shop from the comfort of their own home. I even went to a hotel for somebody once that was from out of area, and I would just bring the dresses into them and safely be on the Zoom call from my car with any questions that they would have. So it worked out really well. We had to adapt and do something, and selling those few dresses really carried us cash flow wise through a good part of the pandemic.
Because I wonder if you can just sort of catch us up with how it works with the sort of the bridal year, as it were, when your busiest time of year is, and how that affected when the pandemic hit and you had to close shop.
Right. So luckily, most of our sales are done in January and February, because that's known as bridal Christmas in the industry, because a lot of people get engaged over the holidays, so over Christmas or over New Year's. So luckily we had our really busy season January and February, so we still had good cash flow. But obviously we still had to pay rent, employees, all these dresses that were coming in, stock samples, etc., while we were closed. So if it had to happen, being closed March through June was a better time than, say, being closed January through March. However, it definitely did set us back a little bit. But luckily, when we reopened, we really came out with a bang. Everybody rushed out to come get their dresses and was ready to shop. So at least it did help the timing of it.
And so you had some of the virtual visits and the mobile visits. I know you're still doing that. What is business like now for you?
We're pretty busy still. I would definitely say that when we reopened, we were really, really busy. And we do offer mobile or virtual appointments to anybody that's not comfortable coming out. I'd say it is tapering off just a little bit, because summer normally tapers off. People are on vacation and things like that. And we anticipate to get busy again in the fall. So at least we still have a lot of appointments. We're doing a lot of different sales and things, moving a lot of our inventory out with sample sales and things like that, especially, like I said, for these micro weddings. So we have a lot of different events coming up in August. So it should hopefully keep our sales going. But luckily, even being open for half of June and all of July, we were still really strong in sales. So hopefully that keeps up for the remainder of the summer.
Michelle, we had an audience question I was wondering if you would be willing to answer. And the question was, what are the actions top 4 actions that business owners and managers need to accomplish to get their businesses reopened, even if it's a phased restart? And we got that question from Salt Lake City.
I would definitely say, you have to adapt to the environment. So anything that you can really do to keep cash flow coming in, whether it be, we were offering people a curbside pickup of dresses that they had bought, just really adapting to a changing environment. You also just really want to be aware of your cash flow, work with your vendors and let them know, hey, I'm wanting and willing to pay you, but can you please work with us on net terms, and maybe see if you can extend some of those accounts out to 30, 60, 90 days to have a little bit more leeway. Apply for any and all government grants that you can, and loans, even if you don't need them, put them aside. It's still a pandemic, you might need them. And again, just really be open-minded to doing different things to help keep your business going and keep going flow. I really think posting on Facebook and Instagram every day, keeping people engaged with all kinds of happy things from our shop really kept us going and kept our customers excited to come back in.
And Michelle, do you feel like now you're prepared if there's another shutdown? Do you feel like you've learned that lesson the hard way, that you're ready to weather that financially?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, we've got the finances ready to go if there is a shutdown. We're selling a lot more dresses off the rack now than we did before. So that's less dresses that we have to order, and it's just really cash flow coming in. So we're really just keeping our cash flow up and as high as we can. We are paying off as much as we can right now with any loans or vendors or anything like that, and just really trying to get in the best possible cash flow situation that we can, because you just never know. I've learned that you never know what's going to happen now in these unprecedented times.
And how important was it that you really knew your books very well before all of this happened? Do you feel like that's something that, I know a lot of small business owners have to keep a very close eye on that, obviously.
Yeah, I'm blessed because, like I said, with the finance background, I am really in the day-to-day accounting of it. I have a bookkeeper as well that does a lot of the data entry, but I know exactly what's coming in and going out every day. But even if you're not financially savvy, I think it's really important just to have a great bookkeeper, because they're going to be the ones that are going to be able to carry you through anything like this going forward in the future. You really need to keep just an eye on everything and just be prepared.
Michelle, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being on your show. Thanks, Nyla.
And now I'd like to introduce our next guest, Andrea Stern, owner of Satori Yoga. She's joining us from San Francisco, California. Hi, Andrea.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being here and for taking the time to speak with us. Andrea, I love your story. I wonder if you can share it with everyone who's tuning in about how you transitioned from human resources to a yoga studio.
So I worked for about 8 years in human resources, and I found that a lot of people were coming to HR with issues that weren't necessarily HR issues. They were more interpersonal issues, and I'd had the benefit of doing yoga as part of my daily routine. And I knew that it brought me a lot of peace and perspective. And I wanted to create a space that would do that for my, fellow financial district workers.
And so let's fast forward. That was 15 years ago. You built this really successful yoga studio in the middle of San Francisco's financial district, where a lot of the people who are coming to your classes are your former colleagues. What did you think when the pandemic first hit and you had to shut down?
Well, I think at first I was in shock just by the gravity of it all. We had gone back and forth about when we should close and whether or not it was the right thing to do, if we could do it using social distancing. And then the city put in an ordinance which said that all of the yoga studios in San Francisco had to close down. So I took a couple weeks to just deal with the gravity of the situation and, take inventory about what we could do. And we decided that live stream was the way to go.
What kind of challenges were involved with that? I have transitioned to doing a lot of yoga online and have talked to a lot of my yoga teachers, some of whom have been really resistant to teaching classes online. Did you find that was also the case with the teachers in your studio?
Absolutely. I mean, we have a small video library of classes, and trying to get teachers to videotape classes had always been a challenge for us. The teachers felt really self-conscious, and it was also hard with video because they were teaching to an empty room. So I think one of the nice parts about live stream is that they actually have people in front of them. They can get feedback from the students and that type of thing. So that was nice. And then it was just a matter of getting everyone up to speed as far as the technology. And that too was a challenge just because people were teaching from their homes. Some teachers were literally teaching like in front of their beds in their studio apartments. And so, you know, it does make you feel a little bit self-conscious about your surroundings and letting people into your home. But I think we've all grown to embrace it at this time, at this stage.
And how did you figure out how to do that? Just the technological side, as well as just thinking about transitioning to becoming a live stream yoga studio?
Well, one of the nice things about taking that initial pause, I had to deal with the emotional impact of it for sure, but it also gave us an opportunity to look at how other studios were doing. I reached out to other studio owners in San Francisco to see, you know, what their best practices were, and so it was really just sort of experiential. We tried things out, we saw what worked, and we saw what didn't.
And Andrew, we've been talking about the pandemic, but also the other major event that's happened in America over the past couple of months since your studio has been closed has been the Black Lives Matter movement and these nationwide protests. And I wonder for you how that moment has collided with the pandemic and the yoga work that you're doing.
Well, I definitely feel like this time has been really clarifying for me in terms of, you know, the demographic for my downtown San Francisco studio was also, you know, your typical very white, very privileged. And it was important to me at this time to find ways that we could include more of the world in what we do. Before, I was only marketing within a 5-block radius because our location was in the heart of downtown. If you didn't have to be downtown, there was no reason for you to come to Satori. We have lots of great neighborhood studios. And so now it's really an opportunity for me to work with other studios in San Francisco to create opportunities online for people to participate in classes from their homes, and we can really serve lower income neighborhoods. We can serve marginalized populations that wouldn't normally be in the financial district and have the opportunity to come to Satori for class.
How are you doing that, Andrea? How are you reaching out to those communities?
Well, what we're doing is we're putting together an online platform which allows people that we can market to all different neighborhoods, especially those neighborhoods that, like I said, are underserved by yoga and wellness and that type of thing. So we're reaching out to them and creating a schedule which focuses on LGBTQ and BIPOC instructors, as well as different ability levels in classes, different body shapes and sizes. And so it's really been exciting to be working with other yoga studio owners to create something that's, you know, going to help to spread the practice throughout the city and hopefully throughout the world.
And so you said this was clarifying. I wonder if you can elaborate a little bit more on how this experience has changed your practice of yoga and also including other people into it. And I'm thinking what you said about involving other communities and involving all kinds of body types. How has that changed for you?
Well, I just feel that I feel that the country needs healing right now more than ever before. And I know that yoga has always been so healing. It really just helps me to look inside and to reconnect my body with my spirit and my brain. And I am hoping that through this new initiative that we're able to help bring that to other communities, like the Black community in particular, as well as the LGBTQ community, which is, huge here in San Francisco. So we weren't seeing them represented in the studio. Even my studio, as a person of color, I looked out at who I was serving and I started to question, and trying to pay the bills and get people in who are going to be able to pay higher prices, I saw that I was excluding a lot of people who really, really needed this important practice. So I'm really excited to, the bright side from the pandemic and being shut down is being able to look at these things and be creative about how we can change yoga for the good.
And do you feel like that's also been true for your instructors, maybe even the ones who might have been initially resistant to being online? Has there been anything freeing about doing virtual and live streaming classes?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I have one teacher who was in Malaysia visiting her father, and she was stuck there, and she was still able to connect with her students. And, she was sheltered in place in Malaysia. And I know that it was like so healing for her to be with our community and be able to serve and practice with our students, even from, so far away. So I definitely think right now we're all seeing how important community is, and having the opportunity to stay together even during the most difficult times has been a gift for sure.
Andrea, I wonder what the future looks like for you and for the studio. I mean, do you envision a time when you will be back in the studio, or are you just planning on continuing a virtual presence and maybe putting a pause on bricks and mortar for a year? Or I don't know how long you're thinking about that.
We are really just playing it by ear and seeing what happens. There are definitely people who live close to the studio who are excited to get back into the studio and to practice in person. But many of the people that we served are working from home for the foreseeable future. So we are taking it day by day and month by month and seeing what unfolds. And I love this space, and we've been here forever, and I would love to continue having in-person classes here, but, we'll just have to see how it goes.
In the meantime, I wonder, we're almost out of time, but if you could really quickly share what you feel like has been your big life lesson from all of this.
My life lesson has honestly been that community is everything. I mean, I've been saying recently, if each person, when you moved into a new home, took ownership of even your 5 closest neighbors, I just think that the world would be so much better. We have to look after each other. We can't really expect people outside of our community to come in and make changes. We have to make sure that we're doing it at home. So I am more inspired than ever to stay close to the people who are near me and to make sure that they know that they've got someone looking after them.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Andrea Stern is owner of Satori Yoga in San Francisco, California. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you. Take care.
And I'd like to welcome back Axios co-founder Mike Allen, who's joining me now.
Nyla, great to be with you. And what a great couple conversations. And I was really struck by what Andrea told you in the Bay Area about how this pandemic moment and this racial justice moment had come together for her.
Mike, it's always fascinating to me how small business owners have to constantly iterate and change to survive. But I think that's what I'm going to remember from today is her talking about how she's used this to really evaluate. And I think oftentimes these big events can be really clarifying. And it was fascinating for me to hear her say how much this brought her back to the original roots of why she started her company in the first place.
Yeah, and in my conversation with Senator Lankford, he talked a little bit about how no matter what kind of business you're in, we're all kind of in the same boat at this moment.
Or if you're Baptist.
That's right. Whether you're a bar or you're a Baptist, it was definitely a memorable line. And Nyla, before you were the host of Axios Today, our podcast, you were a business reporter, and you spent a good amount of time with small businesses.
I did. I've covered the economy at the macro level, but I think I'm always just really amazed at the role that small businesses play in our economy. And especially now, it's really both alarming, but also interesting to see how people are trying to adapt. And those that are surviving, I think really are having to work so hard. And I do wonder, the business reporter in me really wonders about the long-term effects of what our economy is going to look like a year or two from now after all of this is, well, I don't know if it'll be over, but what things will look like.
I mean, what I've learned over this 6-part series that we've done is the resilience, the creativity, like a lot of people didn't know that they were going to pivot. To them, it isn't a pivot; it's just survival. And over the course of these 6 conversations, we've learned so much about how people are using digital tools and using their own sort of instincts for survival that have made a better business, frankly, in many cases for their customers and for their families and for their colleagues and coworkers and employees.
That's what Michelle Files actually said to me as well, the owner of the Curvy Bride. She said, look, if I had been maybe thinking about this in a box, like traditional business ways, I don't think I would have pivoted to online and started doing Zoom bridal dress consulting or saying, I'm going to do mobile bridal dress drop off. And then all of a sudden she's dropping off 5 wedding dresses at a hotel and then going back to her car to socially distance with people and still sell her products. So it's an amazing thing what small business owners do.
And Nyla, we're getting the hook, but we always finish with one fun thing. And you have a small business in your family.
I do. You know, my grandparents actually ran a pharmacy. My parents are from Trinidad, and they kind of ran the town pharmacy in the town they're from in San Fernando. So actually one of my earliest memories of my grandparents are sitting with my grandparents in the pharmacy and watching my grandmother run the cash register and my grandfather be behind the counter. So yeah, I have a lot of love for small businesses.
Well, Nyla Boodoo, thanks for the great job you do with Axios today. And it was great to see you in another medium here on Axios Virtual Events.
Thanks, Mike.
We'd like to thank our partner, Facebook, for this amazing series of conversations. We've had these 6 visits together where we talked with small business owners and policymakers about how they're trying to build community, how they use digital tools in these very hard times for the country. We came away, as Nyla and I were just talking, really inspired about how creative and resilient our fellow Americans have been. So thank you for joining us on this journey. Thank Facebook for these conversations. Thank the Axios Events team for these high wire acts. And I'll see you on Axios.com.